Welcome to the Let's Talk Data podcast series presented by SAP, where we explore game-changing technology and strategies with leading experts with the goal of maximizing the value of data across your organization. If you haven't done so already, please follow or subscribe to our podcast on your favorite channel to stay tuned in.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our SAP Let's Talk Data podcast, Data as a Product, taking your data seriously. My name is Corrie Birkeness. I'm from SAP Product and Solution Marketing, and I'll be your host for today's podcast. So let me start by introducing our two speakers of the day. Daniel Howard, he's a senior analyst at Bloor Research International. Joining him, we have Robert Pickering, Senior Director of Product Strategy and Go-to-Market for Database and Data Management at SAP. So, Robert, would you kindly kick off the conversation today?
Thank you, Corrie. Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here today on an exciting and interesting topic. So everyone at the moment is talking about something as a service. So it's kind of interesting that we're talking about data as a product. Daniel, what is data as a product, and perhaps how is it different then from data as a service?
Hi everyone, this is Daniel. Good to be here today, and thank you for the introductions, Corrie, and the question, Robert. So I think the key insight about data as a product is that it's sort of in the name itself, right? It's about treating your data as a product. And to elaborate on what that really means, you have to think about, rather than sort of treating your data as something which works behind the scenes to power, software applications or data-driven applications of all types. Instead, you have to think of it as data as more of a first-class citizen, which can be packaged up into what is essentially a commercial grade product which you are serving to your customers. It's simply that in this case, the customers are not external customers, but internal, other parts of your business, other business users, who can then pick up that data and use it as effectively as possible to generate, for example, business insights via analytics, maybe. This data as a service, on the other hand, is about the insights. It's about the other end of the spectrum, if you will, where it's about taking in your data and ideally with some sort of very self-servicey, sort of hands-off tool, creating insights from that data. And although there are certainly people out there who will say, oh, these things are mutually exclusive, blah, 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 that's not really my perspective on the matter. I think that actually they can work very well in concert. Analytics is only ever going to be as good as the data you feed it, and therefore your data as a service is only going to be as good as the data you feed it. And data as a product makes sure that data is as high quality and as well put together and as fit for purpose as possible. I certainly think you should be able to use both at once in an effective way.
Okay, you've kind of described, data as a product being a first-class citizen versus data as a service, more about perhaps insights in a more kind of nebulous fashion. How and where is the value to the organization of data as a product?
So digging a bit deeper into data as a product, one of the core insights that really it provides is that you want to be able to take software development practices. So for example, having a very process or systems driven approach, having a great degree of reusability, that sort of thing, and applying it to your data. So it's quite easy, unfortunately, if you have a data as a service system without data as a product. So you've got sort of like maybe a data catalog or something like that being served up in the cloud. But people, when they do their analytics, or they'll be looking at their data or trying to understand it, they'll end up doing the same things over and over again. Not necessarily the same person, but different people who operate in different business domains will look at the same data and say, oh, yes, I'll do all this process to get that out and analyze it and so on. And we're really just wasting time because it's something you've already done before as an organization. So I think that reusability piece is a really big deal for data as a product. And that also ties into things like the data mesh, which centers data as a product, in order to sort of spread this methodology across the organization.
I think one of the things as well, actually, you mentioned about people redoing work in an as a service model. maybe if there's a large data lake and they're, going into that data lake and trying to find the same kinds of answers in the same kinds of ways. So they're not only duplicating effort that others have probably done before, but maybe they're duplicating that effort and not looking at data in the same way. Do you agree that there could be a sort of misinterpretation of the data? So yeah, it sounds to me like we're trying to avoid reinventing wheels here, or maybe we should call it cogs in the organization. And in fact, what data as a product tries to do is to build the right kind of cog or wheel that's trusted and reliable that others can then use in the bigger machine. Would you see it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, one of the key benefits here is reusability, and I think consistency comes along with that. Once if you've got one process for examining a piece of data, it means you're getting the same insights out of it every single time, which is what you want. You don't want different people to look at the same data and take wildly different things away from it. It usually means one of them is doing something wrong.
So going with that metaphor of cogs in a larger machine, which areas would you see data products? What kind of things would be a data product? Maybe you can give the audience some examples.
I suppose you're thinking of, when you think about what would be a data product, you're talking about sort of a domain, a data domain, which could be encapsulated and managed by a specific group of people within your organization. So, for example, your customer base might be a data product. So you have, a data source containing all data sources containing information on all of your customers. Likewise, you might have one for all of your suppliers, or if you're in manufacturing, maybe you'd have all your materials, or either purchases you made or what have you. Basically, the point of data as a product is that it's actually quite generic in the application, that any sort of discrete data domain can be packaged up and served as data as a product, ideally by the people who are most often going to be using and generating that data.
Okay, well that leads me on to the next point then, which is, so I think probably people are realizing the value in generating data as a product around a domain to avoid repeat efforts, to avoid data being misinterpreted. So having a discrete data product serving a domain is great, but have you got experiences or opinions on how this should be done? How are companies doing this well? Or maybe even what are the challenges that they're facing to get to this point?
So I think currently one of the more popular ways of doing data as a product is via a data mesh, which I mentioned before, which is basically the idea that you have this sort of piecemeal domain-driven data curation. So you'll have you'll have the people who are interacting with most of your customer data maintain your customer data as a product, and so on. I mean, I have all the different parts of the organization doing that with some sort of governance layer on top. And that, I think, is a really good use case for data as a product, because, of course, it's effectively a distributed version of it, or an even more distributed version of it, I should say. And I think that the key to getting this stuff right is the governance layer on top. Not the only one, I should say, but it's a really important part. And you have to get that right, because if you don't have the right levels of consistency and curation between these domain level data products, it's not uncommon to get situations where you've got different parts of the organization treating data in different ways from a governance perspective, and that can have problematic consequences for things like sensitive data. If different groups have got different different levels of security and governance may be appropriate between different domains. You may well have data that is very sensitive, data that is merely not, somewhat sensitive or not sensitive at all. But for other things like who should have access to that data, it's important to have a consistent framework. So I think that's really important to get right. The other major aspect I would mention is that it's increasingly, I think, a fair number of companies now are deliberately tying, or not tying, I should say, but using systems to specifically describe how their data products, and indeed their data in general, drives their business, how it contributes to business assets. So, things like strategic goals, profit margins, all that kind of stuff, via, for example, key performance indicators, which are, I think, particularly important data as a product, because as with any product, you want to be able to assess how well it's doing its job. And if you're not measuring it using something like a KPI, a key performance indicator, you're just not going to know. You're not going to know if what you're doing has had any meaningful effect at all, let alone a positive one.
Yeah, I think it's the KPIs is a really interesting point about data. I think data in most organizations until this point has been everyone's recognized the value of data, but it's been a somewhat ethereal thing. And I believe that trying to define your data as a product, and particularly putting some KPIs around it and measuring it and showing the benefit, makes that ethereal thing a more tangible asset for the business that everybody can then understand and get behind, and hopefully that then just grows in the organization to put more measurement on data and drive more value as a result. So Daniel, thank you very much. That's it's a nuanced and interesting topic between data as a product and data as a service. We've discussed the two. We've discussed that they are not opposites. They actually benefit each other. And we could probably keep talking about this for the rest of the day. But I think at this point, we should probably hand back to Corrie, and she can tell the audience where they can find out more. Over to you, Corrie. Thank you.
Thank you, both Daniel and Robert. And so just to summarize, data as a product really refers to the practice of you treating your data as an enterprise asset. The job of your organization's data team is to provide the rest of your organization with the right data at the right time and with that right level of quality. And this is really just ensuring greater utilization of your data to accomplish the desired business outcomes that you're going after, like ensuring regulatory compliance, providing more timely, accurate, and innovative analytical insights, or just improving business process efficiency, or maybe transforming those business processes entirely to drive growth. So I want to thank everyone for listening to our SAP Let's Talk Data podcast, discussing data as a product, taking your data seriously. And I encourage everyone listening to take a look at the additional resources. You can find those available in the podcast description. There's some blog series authored by Daniel, as well as a podcast on Data Fabric that you might find very complementary to this. So please subscribe to the series to stay tuned for new episodes and get caught up on ones that you might have missed. And again, thank you everyone, and be well.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Check out the show notes for additional links to information. And please subscribe or follow to join us on the next episode of Let's Talk Data presented by SAP.